the presenters are speaking. Secondly, the video is optional. Today is going to be kind of like a conversation, so sometimes it helps to see your face when we're speaking to you, but video is 100% optional. There is a button on the bottom of your screen that I'd like you all to avoid hitting. That is the share screen. If you hit that, that will interrupt the presenter's presentation. If and when you have questions, you can do one of a few things. You can either unmute yourself and jump in. You can raise your hand using the raise hand feature, or you can use the chat feature as well, and I will prompt the presenters as needed. If you have any technical issues, please put those into the chat and I'll do my best to help you through those. Just be aware that most of the time those issues stem from your own Wi-Fi connections. If anyone has dialed in via telephone today, please send me an email at mfrey@pgahq.com so we can make sure you get your PDR credits. And finally, we are recording this session, so if you need to refer back to it or if you want to share it with some of your colleagues who couldn't make it this morning, it will be up on our YouTube channel later this week. With that, I would like to turn it over to our friends at Super Speed Golf, who were nice enough to join us this morning and talk to us a little bit about speed training. Take it away, fellas.
Matt, appreciate it. So I'm Mike Napoleon with Super Speed Golf. I'm one of the founders of that company, and here with my good friend, Dr. Tyler Standiford, who's likely torturing some college students later today out in Utah. He's at Utah Valley University. And I honestly has built probably one of the most technologically advanced speed and power labs in the country at this point. We just had the opportunity to be out there, it was about a month ago, with one of our ambassador players, Nana Kortz Madsen, who's had some good results in the last few weeks in the LPGA Tour. We're going to go over a little bit of that data today at some point. And beyond that, we have prepared kind of an overview of some of the things that we do at Super Speed Golf as far as how we kind of create comprehensive speed programs for players, both amateur and professional. Obviously, a small group here this morning, which is always fun for us. If anyone has any questions or there's anything specific that we can help you with on the speed and power side, I mean, we're all yours. So just let us know. Matt, I'm going to pull up some of these slides and we'll go through this. But again, everybody feel free to interrupt and just let us know if you have questions on a specific topic, and we will go from there. All right, let me see if I can get this figured out on actually this might work. It should be able to see that now. We live in the world of Zoom, so we do some of this a little bit differently. Can everybody see that presentation screen?
Yes,
should have a big pod rig up there.
Yep, we're all good.
We're good. Okay, cool. I can't really see you now, so if somebody needs something, please, Matt, interrupt us and scream at us.
You got it.
So yeah, that's kind of the main topic today is, speed training is obviously not new. We started Super Speed Golf back in 2014. So we've had these products out and have been developing speed programs for players for, now going on 10 years. Tyler, I don't even want to count at this point how many of these programs we've built for tour players, but it's approaching probably 400. We kind of have the same process we go through every single time, whether it's a high-level player, whether it's an amateur player, whatever it is, we kind of start and look at everything and then try to create the most optimized program that we could. Where that all starts is kind of looking at all those aspects that affect how far somebody might hit a golf ball. And we've broken that down into kind of 4 major categories here at Super Speed. So usually we have some fun with this and try to guess them all, but in the nature of time this morning, I just want to go through. We look at the physical body, so various different characteristics of mobility, stability, all the different things that could possibly affect speed and power. It definitely is a big one. A player that's, very, very strong, very mobile, and has a lot of positive physical characteristics, has the potential to create a lot more speed and power than somebody who doesn't. So it's definitely an area we have to look at. You know, as a golf coach, I obviously want to look at the swing mechanics, because players can efficiently use the ground, they can efficiently sequence, they can efficiently use lag and wrist mechanics to deliver the club to the ball, or they can't. These things are obviously going to have a major impact on speed and power. Impact physics, which we define as kind of everything that happens right at impact with the club head and the ball interacting, basically everything you can measure on TrackMan, also has a major factor. And these are things that typically are going to be influenced by mechanics or influenced by club fitting and other things like that. And the fourth is what we call the neurological, or kind of how our brain controls our body. Pretty much everything that we look at as far as speed and power can fall into one of these four categories. Now, kind of going through, some of this in an overview sense, I'd like to look at the neurological side first. This is, I would say, and Tyler, you can jump into, this is kind of our specialty here at Superspeed. Overspeed training falls into this category of training the brain to have the body react faster.
Yeah, and I would say, this is kind of the piece of the puzzle that I've always said. It helps unlock maybe some of the potential that a golfer might already have, right? We talk about this idea of, and we see this over and over again with amateur golfers, with even our professional players. This is the thing that helps them tap into some capacities. They're just almost kind of sitting there, but based on the way they've used their body, based on the motor programs they're choosing to use, this is helping their brain communicate with their body in a way that it can really enhance those speeds in a very quick time period.
Yeah, so this is where everything falls into when we talk about overspeed training, which tends to, again, be kind of one piece of the puzzle that we'll work on with our players. Now, neurological training is very different than some of those other categories. It's especially different than mechanics training, mainly because this stuff is going to work on the entire system at the same time. So we're not breaking the swing down. We're working on the entire motion. Generally, this training is going to occur at absolute maximum intensity, maximum speed. We're going to do it for pretty low reps. And, neurological training also tends to have, you're going to see a change immediately when you do this training. So those things are not the same as when we're doing physical training in the gym, or maybe working on some things on the mechanics side. But these kind of the characteristics of what we would call neurological training. Now, this works by essentially training motor units in our body. So this chart, the blue things at the top there, those are motor neurons in your brain. That's where every single motor program that we know how to do. So every motion that we know lives in our brain. When we step on the first tee to take a swing, an electrical signal starts in the brain, goes down our central nervous system, arrives at our muscles, and our muscles respond with that given motion. So another way to think about neurological training is that we're trying to make that process more efficient, and we're trying to get a faster response speed from the muscles when we make that, when we send that signal. We define overspeed training as just making your body move faster than normal during something it already knows how to do, in order to reset that kind of normal or expected reaction speed of the body. And Tyler could go into this for the next hour, but pretty much every study that we've ever done, we see about a 5% gain in effective club speed. Is that true, Tyler? Kind of throughout everything you've done? I've done now studies on our program.
I was going to say, I've probably now done 5 or 6 different studies where players come into my lab, they train, they come back into my lab. And whenever we do these studies, Mike uses the word effective club speed. I think it's important that we don't get too caught up in things that actually don't translate to the golf course. And the thing that translates the very best to the golf course is when they hit a driver with a ball, what are the speed differences as a result of training? And so, I always joke with Mike, it's like the first time I do a post data collection in any of these new studies, I always kind of look at it and think, man, I hope this worked well. And it's like every single study that has happened and has taken place, when I sum up all the results, 5% just keeps coming out over and over and over again, right in line with what Super Speed had been seeing long before I came along and joined the team. I just get the benefit of maybe understanding how it's coming a little more so with my technology that I have.
Yeah, killer. So let's look at how it actually works when we're talking about, pure overspeed training, which is what you would be using our 3-club system that we've had out now, again, since 2014. It kind of works by altering the MOI of the club. So when we create a club that's lighter than the player's driver, in this case, about 20% lighter, that's also a reduction of about 30% in that total club's MOI. So think of that as how it resists rotation as you swing it. Now, with that reduction in weight, corresponding reduction in MOI, you're going to see that a player can swing that club about 19% faster right away. Now, that's a big deal. That's a very, very huge increase when you haven't really changed anything except for what the club's swinging. Now, we'll immediately kind of change that stimulus, and we'll go to a club that's 10% lighter, which is about half of it's going to have about a 15% inertia change. We'll still see those players swinging those clubs significantly faster during the training. And then we go to that red club that's just slightly heavier, adds a little bit of inertia, and we'll still see them swinging faster during the actual training protocol, mainly because the brain's expecting these fast speeds that they've seen with those two lighter clubs at that point. Now, I think some very interesting things that we do see here, and yes, I think it's really important when you're tracking progress. I want to know how much speed someone's gaining when they're hitting a golf ball out on the golf course. I'm going to see ball speed gains, all of that. But some of the data that we get from how fast a player is capable of swinging the individual speed clubs can be very telling when we start to look at some of the other things that we're looking at in creating that more comprehensive speed program. This was actually, Tyler, one of the ones that we saw with Nana. Like, she could swing the lighter clubs in the system extremely fast, but she had a much harder time creating those faster speeds as we got into the red club. Now, in her case, upper body strength was kind of the weakest of her power sources. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And she also had a little bit of a grip strength deficiency. So that told us these are things that we need to work on outside of just speed training so that she can maintain those faster speeds as we get to those slightly higher inertias. So this is what our protocols, look like. If you've done our protocols before, you know that they're pretty simple. Generally, we're not looking for a ton of time there, about 3 times a week with a day off in between. All of these reps, though, are at maximum intensity. And again, for those of you that have done this training, you probably, understand how tired you might get from doing just a simple amount of swings during these protocols. And the other one that we answer this question all the time is that more is not better. Tyler, how many players say, well, I've done this 3 days a week. What can I do at 6?
Yeah, so many. And this is true for any player, right? This isn't just targeted towards the high level players. So many players see some initial gains and they say, hey, let's do this every day, or let's do it 5 or 6 times a day. And the key here when we do neurological training is to make sure that we don't get neurologically fatigued. Because if we start training these in a neurological fatigue state, then what happens is our speeds will start to go down. And now we're not getting the benefit of training the system at those faster speeds. And so it's just take the day off, do it the 3 times a week, make sure your body's really, really fresh. That is the very best way to gain the very most speed.
Yeah, I guess I can't emphasize enough, each one of those swings during the training should be at maximum intensity. So we always tell our players, if you see 2 or 3 in a row that start to go down and you're getting kind of away from your personal best, you're probably at a point where you at least need to take a couple minute break. And if that doesn't work, you should stop training. You're not going to get more speed by swinging slowly during this training.
And I'll add real quick, Mike, on this too. That maximum intensity, I think sometimes with our better players, and they try and make these swings look as pretty as they possibly can. Again, they lose out on this benefit of getting their body to move faster. I was just working with a really high-level junior player in our state recently. I gave him the green club, and he was swinging at 104, 105. And I'm like, you can swing your driver 107. you should be able to swing this club, upwards above kind of 120. And I literally just took the club once, swung it for him. Speeds jumped up, and he's like, "Oh, that's I'm okay to swing it that way." I'm like, "You're okay to swing it any way that makes that club go fast." And he all of a sudden got his club speed, or his green club, up to 122. Put his driver back in his hand. He was up to 112, hitting the ball like 15 yards further in 5 or 10 minutes. So I can't stress enough the idea of allow your body to make a fast athletic swing.
Yeah, I think sometimes as golf coaches, that's something that we almost train out of players. Like we kind of coach players to be a little bit too careful sometimes. That's a big deal. Like the players you see on Sunday afternoon ripping it off the tee are not swinging at 80%. They are pretty close to 99% or so of their maximum output. There's exceptions, but in general, we're seeing the highest level of speed, power, consistency, everything else when you can get a player working as athletically as possible in their golf swing. Now, we've broken down our protocols into what we call training cycles. Now, each training cycle incorporates what's called a primary training phase and then a maintenance phase. Now, primary training phases are that point where we're trying to create speed gains and make them permanent. Maintenance phases are where we're allowing the body to recover and having those be normal out on the golf course. We always do a little 2-week ramp up phase before we go into another training cycle. Again, all of this information is on our website and will be tracked very easily in our app that's coming out here in the next, actually probably a couple weeks. So we can go over that in more detail, but that's how that works with our overspeed cycles. We don't talk about counterweight training as much today, but our counterweight cycles also work in a similar fashion. All right, before we move on, any questions about neurological training? Because the rest of this presentation is kind of about everything else that isn't neurological training and how we fold that in with these overspeed training protocols. All right, well, I guess let's just keep going there, Tyler. So one of the next pieces of the puzzle that we always look at, well, and actually I'd say this is always the first thing that we look at is kind of how that player's body works from a standpoint of strength, power, stability, mobility, balance, all of those different things we're going to screen for, kind of see what we're working with. Now, when we look specifically at the speed and power elements here, we're looking at 3 specific tests that we always look at because they correlate directly to kind of the 3 major power sources that we will find in the golf swing. That first is going to be your upper body power, and we're really looking for kind of push power here. We're looking for core rotational strength in more of a pulling kind of motion, and then we're looking at lower body or jump power. And, between us and our friends at TPI, we have a ton of data on how these 3 different tests correlate to different players, both professional and amateur. So this is kind of what we'll tend to see. We're going to see these ranges. So these ranges come mostly from TPI and some of our database. We have world long drive numbers that comes from both us and TPI. And then the amateur numbers actually come from my golf academy, Catalyst Golf Performance. That's about 120 players total in those data sets. But, this is kind of what we tend to see. As far as looking at the professional data first, there's kind of a range that we'll see between LPGA players and PGA players. But we generally see that most of those players are pretty well balanced in what they're doing. We will obviously always find, a player this is their strong or primary power source, and then we'll correlate to the mechanics to make sure that they're using that primary power source effectively in their swing. With amateurs, it tends to not be nearly as balanced. We tend to see, with amateur males, we'll see a lot more upper body strength, and generally the weakest we're going to see there is kind of the core abilities. For females, we tend to see that lower body strength is almost exactly the same as a lot of our male players, but the core and upper body strengths tend to be a little bit lower. So all of these things kind of work into what we're going to recommend to players, and also we're going to be building our programs out based on how they're using those different power sources in the swing. Tyler, I always like to say, if there was like one thing I could see on a physical screen, it would be power testing. You agree with that?
Yeah, it's interesting, Mike, because I'm looking right now to document. I'm doing some data collections with our women's golf team after our meeting today, and I've done all their power testing on them. And so I'm pulling this up, kind of looking at it here, and just the information I give about unlocking their capacities so that I can understand, hey, like they have this great capacity, and now I'm going to look at ground reaction forces because I can, and how am I going to help them train that? Is just such a key piece of the puzzle. There's so much good information, and to prove Mike's point here, that sit up and throw percent average in my subset here was about 7-8% lower than some of these LPGA averages, but their jump height was actually right in there. And so now I can see as a team across the board, maybe a group of players that you're working with, really finding out a place where they can target some of their physical training. Either if you know how to do that, or working with a great fitness professional in your area.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've seen, I mean, Dana was a good example. Like, her primary power source was like sit up and throws, rotational core strength. And I mean, she was, I want to say, I just had her data up. It was about 20, she threw that ball like 20 feet, 5 inches. And I think we were even using a slightly heavier ball for her than the typical global power testing. And so she's well above LPGA Tour average. And then when we actually went in and looked, and I'll show you her torque data, her way she was using the ground was not really optimizing a lot of what she could have there. So we see that all the time. We'll see a player that has a huge vertical and then isn't using vertical force in the swing effectively. Like those things I feel like are just low-hanging fruit whenever we're going through these programs.
Hey, Michael, we had a question come in from one of our guys in the car. He asked about sprint training and if that can be useful or not.
I mean, I would say very effective for juniors. I mean, look, whenever you're making your body move fast and at high intensity, you're wiring the brain, and that connection to the body is being kind of pushed to do things faster. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Now, as far as like, can I put you on a sprint protocol and automatically see increases in swing speed? I think you need to do a little bit more in there to actually apply some of these speed training elements to the golf swing. Tyler, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, the thought came to my mind is anyone who's asking if moving faster is a better idea, I would say yes, unequivocally, do things that help you move faster. But then I also unlock this part of my brain in terms of the principles of specificity. If you want to get better at swinging a golf club fast, swinging clubs that are very similar to a driver in lengths and weights fast is going to help you get faster in that movement more than sprinting, right? Same way a swimmer is going to get faster by swimming fast, not necessarily by running fast. Not that they won't get some benefits from that, but maybe not the same benefits of that.
I mean, I can tell you this, like in our junior programs we want those kids jumping high, running fast, throwing hard, like anything that you can do in sports that requires speed and power, we train. So yes, I mean, there is definitely crossover. Interesting point here on this testing. Like if we take these databases and look at just the last 5 years, and I think this is surprising to some people, but if we look at just the last 5 years, the increases that we've seen from a power standpoint on the PGA Tour are not nearly as much as you may expect. Like it's gone up about 5%. So it's not a ton. There's other things, and the way these players train actually make a much bigger difference in what's going on. Some of the new things we have coming here at Super Speed, kind of built in conjunction with our good friend Jason Glass, we have physical programs that we're going to be recommending very shortly. And these are all going to release with our app, but we'll have a full body mobility program, lower body strength, core strength, upper body strength. So we'll be able to identify through a very simple physical screening process in our app where players may need some of these different areas. And we can recommend at least a basic starter program for them. And then the goal there would be that they then go on and work maybe more specifically with a fitness professional or, whatnot to optimize some of these physical characteristics. Now, and Tyler, I'll warn you, we need to do this part briefly. We're going to go over a little bit of our information on grip strength that we've collected. This is one that we could definitely get off on a tangent and would probably sacrifice getting to look at anything else today, but we've done a ton of research on this over the last couple of years now, and we actually feel like this is probably one of the more limiting factors, especially for amateur players, that's out there in the kind of area of speed and power. So we're going to try to get through some of this quickly, but if you have questions on this, please hit us up. Tyler, why don't you tell them about this little scatter plot here?
Yeah, so this is just a quick study I did. It was part of a fundraiser golf tournament I set up on a golf hole, a par 4, where they had to hit drivers. And just for fun, I took my TrackMan out there. I took that little device right there, which is called a handheld dynamometer. It allows you to measure isometric grip strength. They just grab it, squeeze as hard as they possibly can. So I just had every golfer squeeze that thing as hard as they can. And then I had them hit a drive measured by TrackMan. And I plotted the grip strength average between the two hands in kilograms. That's on the bottom axis or the x-axis. And then on the y-axis is club speed, and saw a pretty strong relationship and correlation between this grip strength and club head speed. And this was 101 amateur golfers, various genders, various handicap skill levels, and you can see various swing speeds. So,
yeah, really kind of wild stuff. I mean, this isn't something that a lot of people test. We tested every player that came through our academy because we feel like the correlation here is huge. And I like to look at this as if there's a deficiency in grip strength, it's like putting a speed limit on your swing, because the faster you're swinging the golf club, the more strength you need in your hands, wrists, and forearms in order to stabilize that club throughout that motion, especially in transition. So this is where you'll see a lot of amateur players where that swing gets like excessively long and it seems like they just can't transition the golf swing. A lot of that is because they don't have the amount of strength in their hands to apply enough pressure to keep that club, to make that club change direction aggressively. And a lot of your players that do have those more efficient, higher downswing loading type golf swings have a ton of grip strength. If you ever see this player, being able to control the club in transition, this type of thing with a glove is generally that club actually twists in their hands as it's transitioning, which causes some issues there. Getting through the rough is obviously another big one. Anytime, and this can also be effective of just, hitting a ball a little bit fat or a little on the toe or a little on the heel. Those deflections that are going to happen to the club head, if you don't have enough grip strength, you can't maintain control of that club through those numbers. Now, or through those conditions. Now, we've tested a lot of this. So we actually have, and all of this is in kilograms measured on a dynamometer. So if we just look at static grip strength for different populations here, you can see that there are definitely trends that happen. As you get to some of those fastest players in the world, they have a tremendous amount of grip strength. When you start to look at, amateurs, they're much, much less than what we see out on tour. Cheyenne Knight, who you saw in a number of those different pictures there, we met with her last year and she's like, yeah, I mean, if I get in the rough, I have to be super accurate off the tee, because if I get in the deep rough and I'm playing in the Midwest or the Northeast where it becomes thick, like she has a very hard time getting the ball out of that, where you see players out on the PGA Tour get into 3-inch rough and they're like, oh, just take a 7-iron and hit it 190 yards like it's no big deal. So a lot of this has to do with strength in the hands and forearms. Now, this comes from a cool piece of technology that we have that actually measures dynamic grip pressure over the course of the swing. And this is Cheyenne swinging here. These big numbers are actually showing percentage on the lead and the trail hand. And these numbers below show percent of that hand's total capacity. So this is kind of right during the takeaway. You can see there's usually a little bit of an uptick during takeaway. Think of needing more grip pressure in the swing whenever you're making the club change direction. So as it's starting, it's got to have a little bit more. Generally, players will dip down a little bit and then they'll start to rise up as they get toward the top of the swing. Transition is typically when we see it peak. You can see she's at 95% of her capacity in the lead hand here in transition. And then generally speaking, higher level players are going to actually reduce a little bit of their grip pressure as they get into impact, because the club's already accelerating at that point. Now, again, I want to just caution, Tyler, we could probably go into this for the next hour. But that's a pretty common trend that we see with players. You have anything you want to add before we get
very briefly, I would say that those white numbers, the 74% and the 26%, which Mike said is a percentage of their capacity, meaning a percentage of their maximum hold they could do. And that's actually measured with this club as well. My take-home message from all the data collections I've done with this is people don't hold the club a 4 or 5 out of 10. They just don't. I think the lowest I've seen is like a 65 to 70% of their max capacity. And that was with an amateur golfer who had probably the most grip strength I've tested on any player. And so most people live in the 7-8 range. And then if they have really weak grip strength, they might go up to the 9.5% range. So I would just say the data would suggest that people are gripping the club at a much higher pressure, probably 7-8 out of 10, than what we might have typically thought years ago.
I think the key here is relating that player's capacity, so how much grip strength they have, to then how they're using it during the swing. Mm-hmm. Like when we see somebody with a big deficiency, we tend to not see this general pattern that you see in this graph. We tend to see them just kind of grip it tightly the whole time. Amateur players that don't hit the ball in the center of the face generally are going to over grip it, or even kind of grip it even more kind of right post impact, because they're trying to stabilize that club a little bit more. So I think this is really one of the next frontiers in golf instruction, is looking at grip strength and then how it's used during the swing. One of the first ways that we're combating that here at Super Speed is with a product we launched end of last year called the Super Speed Squeeze. This is just really a device to help players increase grip strength capacity. So we have a couple protocols there that just help people get more grip strength, and then how they use that during the swing is something that obviously we need to help them with as golf coaches.
Hey guys, another question from the guys in the car. Do you first test their max pressure statically versus max at any time during the swing?
So we tend to test it statically first, and with that piece of technology, it would do a kind of baseline where it tests their static grip strength with each hand and both hands together, and then we would look at that, how they're actually using it during the swing, and compare those two.
And that device, I'll just add, the golf club, the instrumented golf club with all the sensors in it where you can dynamically look at it during a swing, is obviously a lot more expensive than, my dynamometer that I have sitting on my desk. And so I think if we're looking at just a really base entry level, something that would give you a lot of good information would be something like this, which are relatively inexpensive. And the static amount of pressure, grip, strength they can produce on something like this will at least give you an idea of, hey, this person has the capacity or they don't. And then that might uncover some of the things that you're looking at them doing in their swing. I think there's nothing more frustrating probably as a coach than trying to teach a player how to do something. They can't do it. They're frustrated. You're frustrated. And it might be due to the fact that they just don't have the grip capacity to do some of the things they do, such as shortening their swing or something like that. And so I think that's a real easy way to get some information that you can use to help that player.
Yeah, we'll have those grip dynamometers available on our website within the next about 2 weeks. So if you're not testing it, we're going to offer you a really easy and affordable way to do it. And it's a huge deal when you start to see, once you find that player that does have a major deficiency there, a lot of different things are going to be like, well, it makes sense that they can't control this through the rough, and they're having a hard time transitioning the golf club. All of those things kind of become pretty clear.
Just to follow up, they asked if that's pressure, not force.
So the dynamometer is measuring just capacity of strength. And then that graph that you're seeing is measuring active pressure. It's not telling us what direction that pressure is going in. It's just telling us how much there is.
Thank you.
That is a rabbit hole that we could definitely go down for too long. But
If this gets you really excited, we can send me a message. We can jump into some spreadsheets. I'll show you how I go behind the scenes and turn the pressure into force. And again, Mike, as Mike says, we could do that for 2 hours, but I would love to do that. So send me a message if you'd like to.
yeah, so let's look at the next topic that we love. And this is kind of close to my heart, obviously, as a golf coach looking at swing mechanics. We kind of have our own philosophy of swing mechanics here at Super Speed, and this is kind of how we look at it. It's called the speed pyramid, and that's every single swing that you make, you're going to use the ground. How those forces and torques you create on the ground are going to either help or hurt the ability of your body to create rotational speed, and that rotational speed is eventually going to get out to your arms, hands, and wrists, where we're going to have to create mechanics and lag mechanics as far as how we deliver the club to the ball. The goal is that all of these things interrelate and work together in order to promote the most efficient motion that we can. Now, obviously, we don't have time to look at everything here. We wanted to highlight a couple pieces that we're looking at, as far as how the players that we've looked at have used the ground and what we've kind of intervened and how we've intervened to help them become more efficient. So just in a very, very brief overview, when we're looking at ground force, Tyler, why don't you walk them through kind of some of the things that we like to look at?
Yeah, so when we look at ground reaction force, the first thing we look at is the magnitude, or how big a ground reaction force is. Obviously, that's an important piece of the puzzle in generating club head speed. The second thing we look at is the line of direction. So which way are those forces pointed? Golfers are going to use force boards both to and away from the target, to and away from the ball, and their up and down forces, and then the associated rotations. And then the next thing we look at is where they're actually applying that force. We call that the point of application. That's a really key aspect, because there are places that we should be pushing on the foot to give us the best chance to make the other two the very best they possibly can, if that makes sense, right? So if we want to increase magnitude and directions, but we're not pushing from the right location, it can become very difficult to do those things. So this is kind of a basic level of how we start to look at ground reaction force.
We have a great webinar that's on our website that Tyler and I did that breaks down and goes into a lot of detail on ground reaction force. I mean, this is definitely a very important topic these days. I think some of the things that we look at keep it pretty simple and can kind of help, wade through some of the just crazy detailed stuff that you can get into on this. The kinetic sequence is one of the things that we look at, and this kind of looks at all of those different areas that Tyler just talked at, looking at kind of where's that lateral force coming, and that's kind of an early piece of the swing, looking at sort of looking at torque, or how that player is rotating using the ground, and then looking at vertical force. We've found that these correlate very, very highly to those power screens that we've seen. And we want to see that, a player using their maximum, we want to see a player kind of maxing out their different power sources in different ways with how they use the ground. Now, there's a whole lot more that we could get into detail on ground force. I want to show you some actual ground force data. So this was about last May. We're working with Padraig Harrington. Now, when we first measured him, we're actually seeing him peak his vertical force extremely late. And this is something, obviously, with a high-powered player, we're looking at that and thinking, well, that's low-hanging fruit, because he's not getting a lot out of how he's using vertical force. With some of the drills that we recommended for him, we actually did mainly our level 2 ground reaction force protocol from Super Speed. That one works on timing and point of application. In just a very short amount of time, we were able to move that vertical peak significantly earlier in the swing. And, even for a player of that level, I mean, we were looking at like a 10-mile-an-hour jump in ball speed because of that. So some pretty crazy things. As a golf coach, I've used every piece of technology that's there. Being able to actively measure ground reaction force is probably the one that I will see the fastest and most permanent changes in a player's swing right away. But that was some pretty cool stuff. I wanted to share a little bit of that with from Podrigs. Tyler, this was pretty interesting. This is the stuff that we saw with Nana just about a month ago. And again, her primary power source was rotational torque. And this was pretty wild because so if you look at where she is in her swing, this is actually in the backswing. So she was peaking out her torque in the backswing. So that is actually way too soon. And by the time we got down into the transition, which is where we would actually want to see this peak, she almost had effectively no rotational torque working in the downswing. Tyler, have you seen that one before?
Yeah, again, sometimes you get these like the thing I was looking at that are some of the ways she's pushing on her feet and where she pushed, right? She had some real troubles with the point of application, the red dot on her back foot, kind of migrating a little bit further back, kind of sinking a little more towards the midfoot or the inside of that foot. And when players don't have a good concept of kind of where to push on that foot, that can create some difficulties in that rotational torque. And then again, that's creating some rotations that almost kind of spin out a little bit. And then you can see she creates so much power with the lag. But as Mike said, because we had tested these other things, we knew that if we could clean this up and increase some of this capacities, we'd really be able to help her get a lot more power.
Yeah, and this is a kind of a typical one. So she had a little bit of a restriction in her right hip. And when that got worse, this would get worse. So some of the things that we're looking at for her is just, she's that common player where the backswing can get a little bit too long and she almost has to restart the swing to come down. But this is wild. When you have a player that's 5-6% above LPGA Tour range for speed with that core kind of rotary ability, and you're seeing this on the ground force, we're like, well, that's low hanging fruit. After drills, we were able to get her up into a much more reasonable range and peaking this torque at the right time. And I mean, this was 30 minutes after we did the initial testing or so.
Yeah.
She's still not at a point at 82, which is a weird number called Newton meters to mass as far as how we're measuring torque. I still think that, we're looking for this goal to get well above 100 for Nana, but just getting the timing right, it was a huge area as far as helping her with power and consistency. And you can also see that point of application here moving way, it still needs to be further back on the foot, but it's definitely getting better here. This was the priority list that came out of that. So, I mean, looking at all the different things that we're looking at. Now, we didn't recommend a specific physical program for her. We just made some recommendations that she could go in and work with her trainer, mainly around some of the stuff with her right hip, making sure that's mobilized the right way, and then really looking at more upper body strength where there was a little more deficiency. But our priority list for Nana over the first 4 months of this program, number 1 was grip strength. Number 2 was optimizing out some of those ground forces. So we're kind of looking at a physical characteristic there, then more of a mechanical characteristic. The 3rd and 4th kind of get more into those neurological pieces, where we kind of created a application-based overspeed program for her, and then a direct program to apply this to ball speed out on the golf course. Now, when we look at mechanics, that was just ground force. We also have sequencing and lag and wrist mechanics. But with our app, you're going to see 3 new ground reaction force protocols, which are really going to be, I think, help a lot of players around the world. We're going to have 2 sequencing protocols, and then we have 2 lag protocols as well. All of those, I think, are going to be incredibly effective for players in a lot of different ways. Now, you've heard me mention that we have our app coming out very soon. When I say very soon, we're hopeful to have the beta versions, which if anybody's interested in receiving a private link for, I'll give you all the contact information at the end so you can get involved in that. But we're likely going to have that beta version out by the end of the month. And then probably about 2 to 3 weeks worth of beta testing, and then we'll have the launch version ready to go. This thing is going to be really cool. We've got a lot of different things going on. It's going to be multi-platform. There's going to be a free version that'll track speeds and different things. We're going to have a very advanced premium version that will go through that entire self-physical assessment for a player and allow them to get some very specific recommendations on protocols. We have advanced data tracking. We have custom programs that'll recommend. And there's about 15 of these new protocols that are going to be launching with the app. Now, looking at some of the cool things that's in there, you're going to have a speed assessment that is going to measure club speed, ball speed. We're also going to do that with both driver, 7-iron, and all of this data is going to be tracked internally in the app the entire time. So this is kind of where you're seeing your programs that it'll recommend and then all the different protocols that you can go through. It's going to walk everybody through every one of these training protocols and ask you to input those different speeds that you'd see on a launch monitor. You'll be able to see all the different sessions that you've created of the different protocols. So many cool things in here. You have a bunch of different achievements that you can earn. Our leaderboard features, one of the things we're the most excited about. This will actually look at the entire database of users, and you'll be able to filter that and say, I want to see all male golfers between the ages of 45 and 50, between the handicaps of 2 and 3, and it'll give you a leaderboard of all those different players in driver distance, stats, different speeds with our different clubs. All of that different stuff's going to be available. You're going to have a ton of different stats that it's going to measure. Effort score will show you how you're doing during the sessions, measuring your current speeds versus average lifetime. You'll be able to see things like a new stat that we're creating called distance factor, which is actually going to show you a carry distance relative to your club speed. So think of it as like smash factor, adding in a bunch more variables. So lots of really, really cool things that are happening in the app. We're very excited about this, and that, like I said, should be coming very, very soon. Lots of neat stuff going on there. All right. Kind of the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and we can kind of get out of the protocol or out of the presentation for that, is kind of some of the ways that you guys can get this stuff started at your facilities. We've built some very interactive speed clinic programs that give you all the assets that you would need to be able to launch these programs in an effective way at your facility. I think definitely take a look at some of that if you have an opportunity. Let me actually pull up one more slide here just so that you have the contact information for that. Let me see, you should be able to see that again. These are some of the details of those speed programs. But here you go. So if you need the information for our main point of contact, I'm happy to help you out as well, and Tyler is as well. But if you can contact our director of sales, Harley Abrams, his email is harley@superspeedgolf.com. Phone numbers there as well. But we can get you all of that detail on those speed training programs. Probably the best way we've found to get these things started at your facilities. So I just wanted to make sure that that was in the video, Matt, so everybody had that contact information. So what questions can we answer?
I'll hop in.
Excellent.
Michael, Tyler, thank you for your time. I know, Tyler, you're out west, so this is really early. Michael, don't know where you are, but
I'm in Denver. We're in the same
okay.
time. I've had my coffee going.
Appreciate you guys getting up really early with us. Thanks for doing this. My question is around time of year to implement this. If students are interested in gaining speed, well, they all are, right? But should we be looking at a time of year or a part of the season to launch this? Is there a preferred method that you all have around time of year relative to getting started?
So what we find with our our tour players is speed training just becomes a normal part of their overall program. So if you remember those cycles that I showed you, that like primary training phase, it's about 10 weeks long, and then those maintenance phases. Now, a lot of players will take a less busy time of their season, and that's when they're going to go through one of those primary training phases. And then they may extend that maintenance phase out for four months, 6 months, however that works into their schedule, before they go into another primary training phase. We've seen a lot of facilities that are in, kind of like that more like Philadelphia, where you guys definitely have an off season. You can run a primary type clinic over the winter and then have some maintenance type things going on during the season. I think right now is still a great time to get that started, because you can get that like first couple months of the season, get people really training and getting going with all this. And then by the time a lot of the big events are happening in July, August, September, they're into one of those maintenance phases. So yeah, I mean, I think the time is kind of now, but I will also say that, especially for amateur players, they generally aren't going to see a lot of negative things happen in their game from learning to be more athletic with their golf swings. So it tends to be something that people get in there, they see gains, and then it becomes a big kind of new customer acquisition tool for you as well. Because then you can say, hey, I really like what's going on with these speed gains. You gain 5-6 miles an hour. I think there's a lot we can do with the way you're using the ground, some of the sequencing elements. Here's another lesson program for you. So it becomes one of those easy to get results programs that you can get started, maybe run a 6-week clinic or something, and then move people into more advanced programs based on what you see during that process.
And I just have to add this, Eric, because I see this so often with golfers. In fact, one I worked with winter of 2022 going into 2023 season. He trained, he gained a lot of speed, literally played the best golf of his life. Like, all the members of his club were like, what have you been doing? And played the best round of his golf. I met with him again a few weeks ago, and he's like, yeah, I never speed trained during the season. So if I can emphasize one thing, it's that in that in-season play, you have to get that one-time training per week. He came back, he's like, hey, I lost my speed. And it's like, yeah, of course you did, because you stopped training. So I would just say, man, I cannot emphasize enough. And it's like one time a week is enough to retain those speed gains. So help them find those times in season to train. Then they come back to that next training cycle and they're not starting back from scratch.
Yeah, makes sense. Appreciate it. Thank you both.
Absolutely. How else can we help?
Got a question. Scott Riley from Philadelphia Country Club, and Eric, my first assistant implemented a speed training program over the winter in the indoor area, and it was really well received. So kudos to these guys for all the materials and stuff that really helped us with that. And we got great feedback from our members. My question is, when you guys are building the plans for let's say tour players and they're starting to work on their speed, are they coming to you to also, I'm looking for kind of that balance, right? Where people are doing the speed training and then they're finding themselves swinging differently. And my question basically is, how is that correlating back to their regular swing when they're trying to make these maybe longer back swings and things like that to swing the club faster? And how do you guys encourage them to find balance with that? So when our students are looking for this speed and then their swing, maybe gets different than they thought, but they're not actually hitting a ball when they're using the speed sticks. And obviously I know they can go to their swing coach, but what do you tend to find is the best recipe for them to find common ground there?
Yeah, that one, we can unpack that one here for a little bit. Good question. I would say that, and this was kind of when Tyler was doing a lot of this, but back in 14, 15, 16, we were just getting started, and a lot of players didn't have a dedicated speed program they were working on all the time. We generally did see some slightly bigger changes for players. I'd actually say, especially for the LPGA players, and we worked with hundreds of them during that period. Because I think a lot of those players were coached to be very careful and controlled in their golf swing, and we're out there trying to get them to work more athletically. Now, so there was in those years, it was a bigger transition. I mean, at this point, I think the majority of players around the world are a little bit more open to the fact that they see players out on tour taking major rips at it all the time. Like the stigma that I'm going to swing too hard or too fast and it's going to cause a lot of negatives in my golf swing is kind of really starting to go away, especially with those really high level players. So like in recent years, we have players coming in. It's less about convincing them that they need to swing more aggressively. It's more about refining how they're doing that so that they're not doing things that aren't helping them gain speed. For amateur players, I think it's a case-by-case basis, but one of the best things that we have is, just using those little PRGR radars when we're doing the speed training, because that's instant feedback for, did that swing go faster or did it go slower? And I can tell you that most of the time, the first time a player gets up and just tries to swing faster, they'll do things like what you're saying. Their swing might get longer, or they might, all kinds of different things might happen, but generally the speed doesn't go up when they're just trying to swing faster. And what helps having that feedback is as they start to go through the training and the different drills that we have that work on ground force and work on sequencing, they start to say, hey, I don't necessarily have to bring the club that much further around. It feels, whatever it feels like to the player, it's like, okay, that one felt a little more efficient, or it felt smoother, and wait, the speed went up 3-4 miles an hour. So they start to get that direct feedback of what actually does make the club move faster. And generally speaking, it's a disconnect from what they think is going to make the club move faster. Now, it's also a reason that we have started to implement a lot of these different mechanics drills and those ball speed application drills. Is that's kind of a piece that helps them, kind of bridge that gap between their dedicated speed training, some of the things they're working on with their swing, and then applying those new speeds to actually hitting a golf ball. So, as we get some of those drills out with the app that's coming here very shortly, I think you're going to see some of the answers to that question in practice. Does that answer the question?
It does. Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
I might just add real quick, like we love programs where golfers are speed training and working with a coach. I think that working on both simultaneously is a great way to do it. In my research studies, I'm always looking at what happens to other variables besides just club speed, ball speed, distance, meaning every other thing that TrackMan could measure, sequencing, forces, those types of things. And I'll just say that study after study, we're not seeing these things that a coach would not want to appear in a person's golf swing appear. So they're not speed training and then go from a neutral swing path to swinging 10 out to in and leading with the arms. That's not happening. Their swing mechanics themselves are getting a little more efficient. They're getting faster, but they're not changing drastically. And things like smash factor, attack angles, club paths, face angles, those relationships tend to carry over from whatever their pre-training numbers would. They're just a little bit faster.
Yeah, and I guess also to add, like, we build all of these programs for these players in modules, right? They have their overspeed training module. They have their ground force module. They have whatever it might be that they need. They have these different modules that are in different separate programs that all kind of work together to help that player optimize all those different areas. Awesome. Well, I guess, Matt, if there's no more questions, thanks for having us.
No, thanks for joining us. That was really informative, and I think our guys got a lot out of it.
Excellent. Well, like I said, if there's anything else we can do to help, we're always here. Reach out to us, through Super Speed website or anything, anywhere else. We're on all different social media platforms, and we're always here to help. Like, I think big thing that we like to do here at Super Speed is support coaches. Again, by helping build these programs, helping get you any assets you need to advertise those. We want you to be those ambassadors for our products and our training that can help get it to the players, because it's always better if they're working with you on this stuff than trying to do it on their own. So thanks a lot for your time this morning, and we'll like I said, reach out if there's anything else we can do to help.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye now.
Appreciate what you're doing.